The first class sets have arrived and have made sort of an impact. So we will be going over the meta, what are the best decks and what are some other decks you could be playing in this meta, including cards from all the 4 new class sets. Now I'll be doing this video a little bit differently, I think, where I'll be going a little bit more over the matchups instead of what the decks are trying to do. So let me know if you like this style more or you like the older style better. Now let's begin with the first deck, and once again, the no Minion Demon Hunter, the Spell Demon Hunter, is on top. It looks to be the best deck. It's just a very solid deck all around. The deck doesn't really have many weak spots. The only thing it really loses to are Egg decks, because the deck just doesn't deal with those 2020s, and it loses the Quest Mage, kind of the same reason. It's pretty weak to a lot of stats, but if you're not doing a lot of stats at once, then yeah, this deck is going to most likely beat you most of the time, because the deck is good at almost any stage of the game. Has a lot of ways to get some minions on board early, efficiently remove your board, and then yeah, late game, their turn ult on turn 6 is of course incredibly powerful, even with the sort of nerf fix to it where you can now actually get the neutral demons. The card is actually better now defensively, though you're just slightly less likely to get a card like Inquisitor to win. And then yeah, in the late game this deck can just OTK with those lasting legacies plus the Broxigar. So if you ever run out of gas, that is the way to win with Demon Hunter. The second deck we have here is the Dragon Warrior once again, and yes, deck is still incredibly strong. It is favored into most matchups, just very good at what it does. However, it does have a few slightly unfavored matchups. First of all, the Spell Demon Hunter we just saw is slightly unfavored against that, because I think Demon Hunter just slightly does it better. Get the minions on board, just have slightly better minions, and then of course yeah, the location is kind of what sets it apart from this deck. It also loses the Druid to Token Druid, because yeah, the deck just doesn't have great AoE. There's Searing Fissure, but that's not really good enough to clear those Token Druid boards, and it loses a little bit to Merithra Druid, because yeah, those stats, they can put down a lot of stats to Merithra Druid and then stabilize with the taunts, with the armor cards, and then yeah, this deck doesn't quite have enough finishing power to go through that. And one tip I want to give for this deck is that the Prescient Slitherdrake is actually not a good keep in most matches, believe it or not. The stats are actually pretty weak on keeping this in a mulligan. I think like against aggro decks it's just not quite good enough, because you have to deal with the board, so you rather have other cards, especially cards like Dark Rider in the mulligan. And I think the only time you actually want to keep the card is against slower decks that just really struggle dealing with it, like say, you know, a mage deck or a priest deck. Then the third deck we got is the End of Turn Paladin, and this deck looks like another just really good solid all-around deck that doesn't have too many weak matchups. Now what it excels in is punishing decks that are really slow to ramp up. By that I mean decks like a Merithra Druid, the new Companion Hunter, or a Herald DK, just decks that take a little bit to get going. And then this deck can just punish it with the buffs it has, the snowball effect of cards like Nosdormu and the flight maneuvers. It's just really hard to come back with those decks. That's what it's really good against. And what it's mostly bad against is the no Mini Demon Hunter again, because no Mini Demon Hunter is pretty efficient in the early game with removing stuff, with not getting letting the Paladin get ahead on board, and then yeah, you can't really use those buffs, and this deck gets a bit weaker. Next deck we have here is the no Hand Hunter, the Aggro Hunter, Face Hunter, and yeah, the very aggressive deck is really good in punishing, just like Paladin really. Those decks that have a slow ramp up time, take a while to get going. Because yeah, if you get this deck a little bit of time to hit you in the face, they have so much burst to win. So this deck is really good against decks like Herald Rogue or Quest Mage, decks that take a little bit to get going and don't really have any sustain unless they random it. So they just get punished for not having any healing. And that's also kind of the weakness of this deck. It's just really bad into decks that have sustain, such as Warrior, the Spell Demon Hunter with their Dread Seeds, those 5/5 lifesteal cards, or random Eye Beams, and especially Priest. It's really weak at the Priest, because of course Priest is the best at staying alive through all the healing. And the next deck we have here is the Token Druid, and I think this deck has been gaining some popularity lately, and it's just pretty explosive at getting on the board early. Like especially if you go Ravenous Flock into that Hatchery Helper, that's a ton of stats you can have by turn 3. Like you can almost have a full board of 3/3s by turn 3, and with the lack of removal in the format, that can be extremely strong. So just like some of the other aggro decks, this deck is really good against decks that need a little bit of time to get going, so it beats stuff like a Quest Mage, a Merithra Druid, decks that just don't do much in early game, and surprisingly it's also pretty good against Dragon Warrior, also probably because they don't have AoE, and then yeah, you can kind of compete with the stats of the Dragon Warrior, and then yeah, they don't really win if they can't win on board with the dragons they're playing. Now the weakness of this deck is, once again, we see that a lot, is the Spell Demon Hunter, because they can actually contest the board pretty early with the Dread Seeds. They even have the AoE on the Dread Seed card, or a card like the Rushers, the Horn of Feasting, can be really efficient, because yeah, once that gets on board and it hits like 3 minions, then it's really hard to clear them because you have no AoE with this deck. And because of its speed, this might just be actually like one of the fastest deck to climb the ladder with, even though it might not have the absolute highest win rate. Then we have our first Herald deck here in the Herald Shaman, and this is just all around a good deck. Now, as always, the deck does have some weak matchups and some good matchups. And the good matchups are, for example, a Control Priest. First of all, because of course, with the Herald card, there'll be 4/8 soldiers, and that buff the board by +4 attack, or the neighbor minions by 4 attack, and that's just a pain to deal with for a priest. Plus, on top of that, they have the Muradin, the hammer here, and then with Deathwing, the 5 attack that you can get is like 16 damage in the 1 turn that you can deal. That's without board, that's without any buff. And also a deck like Merithra Druid is a good matchup because they don't just deal with your soldiers early, so you can just snowball with those cards. They can buff your board and you can get those value trades. And because Druid doesn't really have many ways to come back on board from hand, they just play a lot of stats. You can efficiently trade and win the matchup that way. Now, it does have some weak matchups. First of all, the Demon Hunter, once again, is a horrible matchup because they can efficiently clear those soldiers of Elekir, those buff cards, which means, yeah, a lot of cards just don't really work very well. They do push a lot of damage as well, the Demon Hunter, and you don't have a lot of healing outside of, well, Deathwing, or maybe an Elise, but that is kind of slow. So yeah, you really struggle against a Spell Demon Hunter, as well as against Quest Mage, because Quest Mage also needs a bit of time to get going, just like this deck. But once the quest is up for the Mage, the turns are just a little bit stronger with the weapon. Then the second Herald deck we have is the Herald Rogue, and yeah, this deck has always been pretty popular. It's a pretty fun deck to play, and it's just a solid deck overall. Not the most amazing though. It's more like a tier 2, tier 3 kind of deck, which means it has a few weak matchups. First of all, the Face Hunter, the No-Hand Hunter is really bad because yeah, they just push so much damage. You don't have healing unless you random it, and that yeah, it doesn't happen most of the time, and then yeah, you just die to all the damage, so that matchup is horrible. And also Dragon Warrior isn't the best because yeah, they put up a lot of stats, and yeah, unless again you random the perfect answer, it's a pain to deal with it because a card like the Twilight Mistress is usually just a little bit too late for you to win that matchup. Like, you might be able to clear the board, but then they just finish you off with the damage they got. And this deck, what is it good against? Well, you might think this is good against Spell Demon Hunter because of King Lane, because it disables a lot of their cards, but in reality, it's about a 50-50 matchup. So just imagine how bad the matchup would be if you didn't have King Lane. But yeah, then you just hope they kind of just don't draw it, so half the cards don't work, and if they do draw it, yeah, you're in some real trouble against Demon Hunter. But what it does beat is decks that really need board to win the game, such as the Merithra Druid, because yeah, they make a big board, you play that Twilight Mistress with an Aralex. They don't really have a great way to come back, and you just win that way. And here we have the Quest Mage. And no, don't run this with the Leyline card. That is not worth it if you're trying to win. And this is just a good deck, because the deck is just so powerful after you get the weapon equipped. From that quest, of course, from the Forbidden Sequence, you get the weapon. However, yeah, you do need to get to the weapon. So in matchups that are really fast, yeah, this deck kind of struggles, because then if you just discover, you're not really dealing with the board, and then yeah, you just die before you can actually use that weapon. So what that means is that it's weak to those aggro decks, such as the Token Druid, the No-Hand Hunter, and even the Dragon Warrior just puts up too much stats and damage early on to really beat that consistently. Now, what it does mean though is it does beat the matches that don't have that fast start, that do kind of struggle with those stats after the weapon comes down. So it's one of the few decks that's actually good against the Minion DH, because again, they don't deal well with too many stats on the board. Can be good against the Priest, because they probably don't have too many clears to deal with all of the boards you can make. And you can often maybe scam some damage like Morchi, and then you get like the daggers for 12. Or the Aeon Rant of Demon Hunter for another 8. Or I've even had that against me combined from just the 20 damage of Morchi with the weapon. That can really win the game. And it's good against Herald Shaman because the reasons I gave you earlier. And here's the Merithra Druid, already mentioned a couple of times. Now, this is running a few new cards. I'm not entirely convinced that they are worth running. We got the Bashana Rune Totem, and we got the Heart Road Stones. We don't have the new 5-drop though. That's probably a little bit too clunky, and you just play too many minions for that. Well, like a card like Heartwood Stones, at least it still draws a card when it's active, and not just a 5 mana understated taunt. So this deck is good against the Spell Demon Hunter, one of the few decks that is good against it. It's slightly favored into that, as well as slightly favored into the Dragon Warrior. So it's kind of funny, it's like slightly favored into like the two main meta decks, I would say, but then it also does lose to a bunch of other decks, which means this deck isn't really quite a top tier deck. First of all, it just loses to pretty much any aggro deck, because, yeah, once again, this deck just doesn't do much early on, right? It needs to ramp, it needs a couple of turns to get Aura, to get triggered, and then if you get it, you have a chance, but if you don't get it, yeah, you just got no shot, because you just take too much damage before you can ever recover with cards like the Under King here. So that's bad into all those aggro decks, the Herald Shaman and also the Herald Rogue, because we mentioned this deck just doesn't do well with the Twilight Mistress. And here's the one Warlock deck we got, the Egg Warlock, the Herald Egg Warlock, and this deck, overall, it doesn't really have a great matchup spread, it just loses to most decks. However, it has one really good matchup, and that is the Spell Demon Hunter, just like the Egg Warrior that we don't cover in this video. Yeah, that's kind of the main reason this deck is playable, is that it beats the Spell Demon Hunter, because yeah, Spell Demon Hunter just doesn't do well with the 2020s this deck can put on the board. And while Warrior is even better because it also can gain health, and this deck can't, this deck does have the advantage of having a card such as Archetypes of Thorns, which makes it easier to get multiple 2020s on board by like turn 6, and by that point usually the Demon Hunter can't have pushed enough damage, and then you get those 2020s and then they just die because they can't deal with it. So yeah, that's the main reason to play this deck, is to try and counter Demon Hunter. And yeah, the other matchups, it's pretty bad in most other matchups. Then we have the Turn Paladin, a new deck from the set with a bunch of new cards, especially the Convalescence is great, just feels like the one good card by itself. And a lot of synergies for the hero power for the Silverhand recruits. We got here +1 attack, we got here is the +1 health on them, and we got teamwork. This especially is great if you play Hatching Ceremony before it, and the Arrow Thrower to double those stats, or even the weapon to give them +1/+1. But yeah, this weapon feels pretty weak though. 5 mana to just give them +1/+1, and you get a 3/2 weapon. Just pretty weak. The best card might even be just Nosdormu in this deck, because yeah, once you buff those minions with Divine Shields, there's not a lot of clears in the meta. That is really strong. And overall, yeah, this deck just doesn't really have many great matchups. The only good one I think I saw was the Merithra Druid. And yeah, overall, this deck is just kind of worse in most ways compared to the End of Turn Paladin, but it is running new cards, that's why I wanted to highlight it, but definitely not the best choice if you want to climb the ladder. Then we have the Herald Death Knight, and sadly, yeah, this deck isn't really that strong. It's, yeah, just takes a little bit too long to get going, and those Herald cards are just too expensive when Rogue has like 2 and 3 mana, Shaman has 2 and 2 mana Herald cards. Instead, this deck has a 4 mana Herald card and a situational 6 mana Herald card, and that just really hurts. Once it gets to the late game, it can be pretty good with Onyxia and then rezzing it with a more Manifest, or maybe if you're discovering Onyxia, but yeah, that just doesn't happen most of the time. So just pretty weak option overall. It does beat, however, Control Priest. That's like the one matchup it actually beats. So if you really want to beat Control Priest, this is one of the decks you could pick. And it's like slightly favored against Merithra Druid, Aggro Hunter, but then loses just most matchups to most of the other meta decks. So yeah, if you want to play the Death Knight. So if you want to play Death Knight, this is probably the build to play for Herald Death Knight. I played a bit myself. It was okay, nothing amazing. Just don't expect it to perform any miracles when you're trying to climb. Then we're getting to the pretty weak decks I really wouldn't recommend to climb, but yeah, I want to mention a few here. First of all, we got the Companion Hunter, the new deck that is very popular on ladder. I'm sure you faced it a bunch already. And yeah, it's very popular, just not very good. It just takes way too long to get going. And there's even a bug where you don't summon all the animal companions you should get. When you get like over 10 average beast cost, even though it should be kept at 10. Then I don't expect this deck to be suddenly any better. Also, what this deck is running is the Crazed Alchemist. This can be good once you get the Tortola, then swap the attack and health of it, and then just basically OTK the opponent with it. That can be good in like a slower matchup against, say, a Priest that doesn't mind leaving up a Tortola because it doesn't really do anything with one attack. But that's really only for the slow matchups. And then yeah, most decks are pretty fast, or mid-range decks that it doesn't really do well against. And only chance the deck really has is against those slower decks, and then every other matchups is pretty unfavored. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend this to climb, but I wanted to highlight it, as this looks like it might be the best build for this new Animal Companion Hunter. And here we have the Control Priest, and I've been playing this a ton if you watch my stream here on YouTube or on Twitch. Yeah, I play this very often, and I really like it. I always do pretty well with it, like 55% win rate. I finished top 100 with this last season, so I feel like it's viable, but it really requires a lot of meta knowledge, matchup knowledge to really use this deck to its fullest. So I really wouldn't recommend this to climb, but if you want to play a control deck, it is like the only control deck that is remotely playable. And I can show my own stats, say what I've played, because I've played it quite a few games with the good against, and you can see it absolutely slaughters the Hunters. Even, like I said though, the Hunter, the last Companion Hunter, it should be favored into this, but I've been beating like pretty much all of them, so it's really good against that, and especially the Aggro Hunter as well. And then it does lose the Demon Hunter. It's really a struggle because they can so often easily OTK you. And what you can tell you, it also beats the Rogue and the Warriors, especially the Egg Warriors, are such a good matchup. You just have so many ways to kill those 20/20s, and then just struggle against the Quest Mages. Should struggle against Shaman. Surprisingly, I'm 50%, but should really struggle against them. The Druids are not the best, and yeah, the Death Knights are not the best matchup as well. But yeah, I still want to put it here. I think this is the optimal build. I don't think you want to go the tech route. I just don't think that really works out on average. And the last deck we have here is the Leyline Mage, and make no mistake, this is a terrible deck, a very, very bad deck. Do not play this if you intend to climb. I just want to put it out here so we have a new deck. And if you want to play it, I would suggest this build. This looks like maybe it's somewhat remotely playable, that it can occasionally win a game. It's running kind of like with some spell damage cards like the Arcane Flow, the Arcane Barrage, to kind of be a bit of a spell damage mage with the leyline stuff, so you can kind of survive, have some clears with it, but yeah, it just doesn't work. It's kind of unfavored into pretty much anything, so don't play this if you expect to climb. Just play it because you want to play it, you bought a new class set. But yeah, then I would probably go with this build if you do plan on playing it. So those are all the decks I got for you. Let me know what you thought of these decks. Do you like the new format where I kind of discuss what matchups are good and bad? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.